Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. It has been just over 1 year since I built my PC, so I thought today we would have a look and see how it is keeping up in games over a year later. So for those of you who don't know, this is my own PC which I built myself just over a year ago. It has a Ryzen 5 2600 currently overclocked to 4 GHz, a GTX 1060 6GB MSI Gaming X variant, 16GB of GSKILL RIPJAWS 3000 MHz DDR4 RAM, and a 240GB SanDisk SSD for the boot drive, and a 1TB Seagate Barracuda 7200 RPM hard disk drive. So the additions that I've made to the PC since I built this is swapping from an EVGA single fan GTX 1060 6GB to the current MSI Gaming X GTX 1060 6GB, which has dual fans. I changed the card because the temps on the EVGA card were too high even after applying new thermal paste and turning up the fans in MSI Afterburner. The EVGA card would get to the point where it would crash the system as it was too hot. I have also gone from the AMD stock cooler to the Cooler Master Hyper 212 Turbo CPU cooler, just to also help with the temps when overclocking. Anyway, let's get to the benchmarks and see how this PC performs in late 2020. First up is dirt free with the settings maxed out and the 1080p resolution. For some reason MSI Afterburner broke on this game, so we will have to take the results from the in-game benchmark, which were an average of 193 FPS and a minimum of 142 FPS, so no trouble in this game. Next up was Rocket League at the high preset and the 1080p resolution. This gave us an average of 247 FPS with a 1% low of 200 FPS and a 0.1% low of 65 FPS. Yes, you're going to hear a lot of high frame rates today. Next up is GTA 5. Even though it is an old game now, a lot of people still play it and still want to see it benchmarked. At the highest settings we saw an average of 128 FPS, a 1% low of 65 FPS and a 0.1% low of 41 FPS in the in-game benchmark, which can be a little bit more intensive than the actual game itself. Next up is Fortnite with the high settings and the 1080p resolution. This saw us get an average of 104 FPS, a 1% low of 31 FPS and a 0.1% low of 12 FPS. This game seems to suffer with stutters quite a lot in game on all types of hardware. I find it better to cap the game to something like 60 FPS so you don't see as many big drops in game. The next game is Dirt Rally 2.0. This was with the high preset and the 1080p resolution yet again. We saw an average of 102 FPS, a 1% low of 59 FPS and a 0.1% low of 8 FPS. Again, this game you're better off capping the frame rate to 60 FPS to prevent big FPS drops. The next game is something that is a little bit more intensive on the CPU. This is City Skylines. We had to put the settings down to medium and turn off anti-aliasing, but still at the 1080p resolution. We saw an average of 60 FPS, a 1% low of 38 FPS and a 0.1% low of 15 FPS. These drops seemed to happen when suddenly a lot was going on. We were zooming into the city, however the drops weren't too noticeable in the game. The next game is Halo the Master Chief Collection at the settings completely maxed out and the 1080p resolution. We saw an average of 228 FPS, a 1% low of 106 FPS and a 0.1% low of 18 FPS. But obviously the drops weren't noticeable in game and the big drops seemed to happen in loading screens and not in the actual gameplay. The final game is Forza Horizon 4 at the Ultra preset and the 1080p resolution. Yet again MSI Afterburner was broken on Forza Horizon 4, so the figures were taken from the in-game benchmark. The game achieved an average FPS of 81 and a minimum of 71 FPS. Now for all you guys that like synthetics, we have 3D Mark's Time Spy, which we got an overall score of 4,444, a graphics score of 4,242, and a CPU score of 6,095. So as you can see, our CPU is being bottlenecked by our graphics card. So to conclude, does this PC still play the games I want it to? Well, yes. Every game that I want to play runs 90% of the time with the high preset and 60 FPS, and that's fine by me. Some of you might be saying I need to upgrade my graphics card, but the GTX 1060 6GB is a great card and plays every game I need it to now. Now I'm sorry, but I need to go on a bit of a rant here about this, but there is nothing on the GPU market in my price range which is compelling decision to upgrade, as I won't be getting a massive boost in performance. For the CPU, you can see it's great at the moment, however it has slightly longer render times than I'm happy with, and it cannot handle 4K footage or even rendering in 4K for that matter. I tried to mitigate this with a 4GHz overclock, but it saves me 30 seconds, if that, on render times, but it still can't handle 4K. It also gives a little boost to games, but it's negligible. Maybe a couple of FPS extra, but in some cases it can worsen performance in games. For the extra heat and fan noise I get for a tiny bit more performance, it just isn't worth it. Especially when you factor in certain games, it's losing me some FPS. Anyway, I'm sorry for a bit of a rant there, but I'm planning to upgrade to a Ryzen 7 3700X and an Asus motherboard in 2021 when the prices of PC components finally return to normal. Anyway, if you like this video, leave a like and subscribe if you're not already, as we are trying to get to 200 subs before the end of the year, and it would be highly appreciated if you did. Anyway guys, I'll see you in the next one.